So let's revisit one of the most iconic scenes in The Lord of the Rings, when Arwen and Frodo are fleeing from the Nazgul on horseback. There is no shortage of exciting scenes in Lord of the Rings, whether it's impressive battle scenes or just really great dialogue between characters. There's always something in the movie where a fan is saying, "Oh, I love this part." And this chase on horseback is one of those scenes. What makes this scene so special is the masterful way they build tension. There are plenty of fight scenes in The Lord of the Rings, but there is something about this one scene that really achieved an unusual sense of unease. The movie establishes quickly that Arwen is the best choice of getting Frodo to the elves the fastest, but it's certainly not guaranteed when 8 ring wraiths are on your tail. So let's talk about how they shot this scene. The chase opens with Arwen and Frodo galloping through open country. What we see is a wide shot of Arwen's horse alone in the landscape, and the audience gets a sense that there's no one else for miles as these two tear across the countryside. This is important because the next scene we see that the Nazgul have caught up with them despite their speed, which introduces dread into the scene. Because if Arwen and Frodo have lost that much ground to the Nazgul, then these wraiths must be formidable riders. Now here's something that's not immediately obvious but still makes a subconscious impression. As they are riding through different terrain, Arwen is often seen with beams of light hitting her, while the Nazgul are almost always shrouded in shadow. Throughout his writing, Tolkien would often use light and dark as symbols for good and evil. So I thought it was very impressive that Peter Jackson and Andrew Lesnie, the cinematographer, were able to have this subtle use of light and shadow despite the fact that the actors are all riding through the same forest. In addition to the use of light, the choice of shot composition further enhances the weight of the moment. The low-angle shots of Arwen on horseback convey her strength and resolve, while the high-angle shots of the ring wraiths show them as forces of darkness. This emphasizes the tug-of-war of hope and despair the audience is feeling as we're watching Arwen dance out of arm's reach of the Nazgul over and over again. Sound in this scene is also put to use very effectively. As they are weaving in and out of trees, trying to outmaneuver each other, the sound of the hooves thundering against the ground combined with the unnatural screeches of the Nazgul heighten the frantic feel of this chase. Now eventually the chase reaches a crescendo when the group reaches a large stream. Now, if you know the story through the movies, you may very well have gotten the impression that the Nazgul cannot go into water, like it's a Wicked Witch situation where they would melt if they got wet. But the reason the Nazgul avoid water is because of Ulmo. Ulmo? Who's Ulmo? You can learn about Ulmo in the Silmarillion. Tolkien created an incredibly thorough history of Middle-earth, and The Lord of the Rings is merely the tip of the iceberg. The history of all the peoples is long, and if you're a Lord of the Ring enthusiast, there is so much to read about. Ulmo is the Lord of the Waters, and part of the Vala, who were godlike beings out to oppose all forces of evil. So you can imagine what Ulmo would do if a bunch of wraiths went splashing around in his waters. So that's why the Nazgul generally avoid water, to avoid Ulmo's wrath. So here, when we see Arwen challenge the wraiths that if they want Frodo, they should come and claim him, we see the wraiths actually step into the water. This one wildly bold move on the Nazgul's part solidifies how angry and worked up they must be that they are willing to cross water just to get to Frodo. Now at this point in the sequence, the water is also serving as Arwen's last shield against the Nazgul. She's managed to evade the wraith's grasp up until this moment by the skin of her teeth, so the image of the wraiths beginning to cross the water leaves the audience with this sense of defeat. And it's at that point that Arwen, an elf, calls on the power of her people to come to their aid. Arwen's father, Elrond, has mastery over the waters of the river, so we are then rewarded with one of the coolest images in the Fellowship of the Ring, when the waters begin to rise quickly and a torrent of waves take out the wraiths in one fell swoop. Now at the time, this was cutting-edge CGI work. I think the visual of the waves morphing into the image of stampeding horses is incredibly cool and was achieved without being over the top or cheesy. Here's a fun fact that a lot of readers out there will know. In the book, Arwen never embarked on this chase with the Nazgul. The elf Glorfindel was the one sent to aid Aragorn and the hobbits after Frodo was wounded. Glorfindel then lent Frodo his horse to ride to safety alone. I think this modification of the story was largely a practical one. There is a huge amount of characters in Tolkien's work, and it's not really feasible to include all of them in the movie. When books or even historical events are adapted for film, one of the first things to happen is character consolidation. It's better to have a handful of characters that the audience are super familiar with than to have a dozen characters, each with smaller contributions to the story. This makes the story easier to tell and easier to follow. Peter Jackson has said in interviews that his goal was to keep as close to Tolkien's writing as possible, and I think he managed to keep to the tone and spirit of Tolkien's story very well. This is just one of many memorable scenes in The Lord of the Rings. Let me know what your favorite scenes are in the comments. Thanks for watching.